let's talk to Harley Lipmann, foreign policy commentator on this as well. Harley, good evening. Thank you very much for coming on to talk about this. So where does this go next? Because I keep hearing people say we have to show strength and force against Putin to bring this to an end, but Donald Trump is trying very hard via Witkoff and Jared Kushner as well now to act with diplomacy at this stage, to bring it to a more peaceful conclusion without more people dying at Christmas. Harley.
Well, you know, your previous speaker was, I think, on point. Let me just give you a good analogy. If the year was, I think it's 1936, and Germany has signed a treaty with the Allies who won World War I called the Treaty of Versailles, and it said that the Rhineland, which was part of Germany, needs to be demilitarized. So Germany sent troops into the Rhineland to militarize it in violation of the Treaty of Versailles. His generals were alarmed, and they said, what happens if England and France opposes us? And he said, then we'll retreat. But England and France did not oppose Germany. And ever since then, Hitler kept going forward and forward and saw Europe as it is today, a continent of appeasers. And I say, I know you mean well, you're a very caring person, but I say this with great respect to you, but your view will lead us to World War III. I'm 100% sure. Because you are desperate for peace, that you're willing to do almost anything, ignoring the fact that Russia is the aggressor. You said before that we're there to crush Russia. Nobody's here to crush Russia. NATO is an entirely defensive organization. Nothing offensive about it. Nobody's looking to change the government in Russia or to enter Russian territory. Nobody. This is about Russia being imperialistic, colonialistic, and taking control of another country that does not belong to them. They're stealing Ukrainian land and committing atrocities along the way. They took 20,000 Ukrainian children. I don't hear any of you talk about that. And by the way, I don't know of any dictator in history that successfully conquered their weaker neighbor and just stopped. Your previous guest is spot on. If he succeeds with this and takes more of Ukraine, and we know that the peace plan that we're looking at, that the tentative peace plan, we'll call it, calls for the Donbas area to be given to Russia, which they did not even conquer. That will enable them to enter the rest of Ukraine easily. They were not able to defeat Ukraine in 4 years, partly because the Donbas area is strongly fortified and has natural barriers to it. The example is one last quick example, World War II again. Your previous speaker on point pointed out that in Czechoslovakia, Hitler said, I only want the Sudetenland. I'm not going to touch the rest of Czechoslovakia. Well, the West gave him the Sudetenland, which, yes, go ahead.
I hear you, and this is what we hear all the time. It's all this psychology. It's basically just psychology. Let me bring my panel in as well, if we can. Can we bring our boys into boxes here? Like what I keep hearing, Harley, is we can read Putin's mind, and we know that if we allow him to have parts of Ukraine, then he will not stop. But again, I just ask you and it comes from a place of naivety perhaps, is why hasn't he done this before now? He's been in power for more than 25 years.
It's a good question. It's a very good question, and I don't have the answer to that question. But that doesn't negate the point that he wants this land. Now, how do we know that? I predicted on television before he went into Ukraine that he would go into Ukraine. And it's not because I'm so smart, I'm not. It's just that I read. And if you read Putin's speeches over the last 20, 25 years, he's been saying the biggest calamity to happen to Russia was the loss of its empire in the last century. He doesn't mention World War II, where Russia lost almost 30 million people. Think what this says about him. The biggest disaster to befall Russia is losing his empire, and he wants it back. Read his speeches. You don't have to be smart. Just read it. It's very clear. It's arrogance to think you know better what he means than his own words. He wants this land back. He believes it belongs to Russia. And in fairness to him, Russia has always controlled Ukraine. except for a brief period during Lenin's rule. And he wants this back.
Your personal data could be exposed right now without you even knowing it. And if you want it removed, use incogni.com/GBnews in the description now and get 60% off an annual plan on us. Incogni reach out to the data brokers on your behalf and request that your information be deleted from their databases. And they'll keep sending removal requests to make sure your data stays gone. Sometimes your information ends up on strange, obscure websites that automated tools just can't reach. And that's why Incogni just launched their unlimited plan with a feature called Custom Removals. With this, you can submit any link where your personal information appears, literally paste in the URL, and their privacy team will investigate and work to get it removed. And getting started is super easy. Hit the link in the description, create an Incogni account, and tell them whose data you want removed. Grant them permission to work on your behalf, and then all you've got to do is sit back and relax. They'll keep you updated along the way. Incogni is totally risk-free for 30 days. If you try it, it's not for you, you'll get a full refund. So take back control of your personal data today with Incogni. Use our code GBNews at checkout via the link in the description, and you'll get 60% off an annual plan.
But if we cast our mind back to on the eve of that invasion, when he did sit down and give that speech, and he talks about, and remember, he was under pressure from his own people because the Donbass is majority Russian residents, Russian citizens, Russian-speaking people who were being bombed by the Ukrainian forces. And his argument was, and I'm not here to defend him, it's horrendous what's happened to those hundreds of thousands of people, potentially millions of people that have died in this conflict. It's horrific. But his argument was, I am under pressure from my own people to go in and protect the Russian people in the Donbass, and I will do that in order to protect my people. And if there can be an arrangement whereby...
That's so convenient. Well, you know, this is exactly what Hitler used. He said the German people were being discriminated against, and they were, in the Sudetenland. And the majority of the people in the Sudetenland, which was part of Czechoslovakia, were German. This is what dictators use. They have a very clever reason. They have good rationalizations, but it's all a mask for conquest. His role model is Ivan the Terrible. His role model is not Bill Clinton or Obama.
You're just playing psychologist again. You're just trying to read someone's mind, and I just don't think it's helpful to be trying to read people's minds and say, look at what he's read. I mean, the point being that if this agreement in terms of, okay, well, you can control the Donbass with majority Russian-speaking people in it, and you rent it back to us, which is one of these points, and it sounds like a potential solution cooked up by businessmen, maybe not politicians, and you can pay Ukraine to effectively own that area of land and rule that area. If Putin says, fine, let's do that, I'm okay with that, why is that not a good solution, Harley?
Okay, a few reasons. One, I'm going to go back to what you said, playing psychology. Read his speeches. He's given dozens of speeches. It's not just once. He mentions this. He's been mentioning this for 20 years. Believe him. It's arrogance to think
he hasn't done anything about it until now.
Well, because people ignored it. They viewed it as it's propaganda. He's using it to mobilize his country. He's venting. I can't explain why people ignored it. He never really acted on it. But look, he went to war against Georgia. He took Crimea. Then he attacked Ukraine. What more do you need? This is not playing psychology. He took 3 countries, pieces of Georgia, part of Ukraine, Crimea, which he absorbed in 2014. And then in 2022, he then went after Ukraine itself. Those are 3 examples. Where is that about psychology? He's being an aggressor. And by the way, I want to share something very important with you. If you are going to establish a precedent that you could change borders through force, you are opening up the whole world to war and conflict, because most nations in the world have border disputes with their neighbors. Think about that. And I'll add another big one. Look over at China. They're watching everything.
But he would say that is why he doesn't want Ukraine to be part of NATO. by that logic, his reasoning that he does not want Ukraine to be part of NATO, and that's the line in the sand, that would apply to him, surely.
Well, you know why he doesn't want Ukraine to be part of NATO? Because then he can't conquer Ukraine.
Because they're on his border, as you just said.
It's on his border, but why? NATO does not threaten Russia. That's the whole point. It's manufactured by Putin to mask conquest. You believe in the goodness of people, and you have a hard time seeing that someone could just be a conqueror like conquerors 100 years ago and 200 years ago. That's exactly what we're seeing. He is a man obsessed with getting back his empire. His speeches, again, I'll repeat this, because this is really important. He's given dozens of speeches.
I've listened
over 20
to the
years.
speeches. I interpret them slightly differently. I've listened to the speeches. Let me bring in my panellist. Matthew, do you want to wade in on this? Because we all want the same thing. We all want peace, I think. I think my logic is just simply, in order to gain peace, you do have to listen to the aggressor to work out the solution, rather than just bomb them.
No, I don't think you listen.
Hang on, Harley. Hang on, Harley. Go on.
One of the points that Mr. Lipmann made was that NATO was a defensive force in Europe, and allowing Ukraine to join NATO makes it an offensive force to the people of Russia. I don't know where this ends. I do wonder what a Western Europe, what your European investment and American investment looks like in Ukraine that forces Vladimir Putin to stop. Do we stop at the border between Ukraine and Russia, or do we go into Georgia, or do we go where does this stop? It is the John Bolton form of foreign policy where we take military adventurism into places, and I just don't know where this war game, or Bev as you call it, the psychology, where these war games end. Do we march into Moscow? How do you stop a madman if he is still in office? And so there are a lot of questions, and as a small L libertarian, which I'm sure Mr. Lipmann will not appreciate, I'm just deeply concerned about the level of investment and where we would have to stop, or where Western forces would have to stop Vladimir Putin.
Eric, what would you like to say?
Well, you asked a question about why is it that he has not done anything until now. And I would answer that Putin has been actually very, very active up until now. I think people just perhaps did not read the signs. But one thing we see about NATO is NATO has, in fact, actually expanded. In fact, they've gone beyond their 80s borders in terms of what would actually be part of NATO. That is perhaps, I think, a massive trigger for Vladimir Putin. And now you see more and more countries joining NATO. And for someone who is as paranoid and as deeply threatened as Vladimir Putin is, this has always, I think, been a concern for him. And so we have seen, as NATO has continued to expand, so has Vladimir Putin also attempted to expand Russia's boundaries as well. And I think he has also continued to push to see how far he could go against the West and what the West is actually prepared to do. We talk about what he has done in Crimea. That took place back in 2014. After 2014, we saw a number of poisonings and other low warfare attempts by Vladimir Putin on the West that were deeply and intentionally targeted in the United States and France, also testing our boundaries. And it's no different than what we saw from Al-Qaeda in the United States. We saw the 94 World Trade bombing. We saw the USS Cole bombing in 1994, leading up to, of course, that spectacular bombing on the World Trade Center on 9/11. And so I think that is an exact blueprint of what we're seeing from Vladimir Putin. So this is not something that just came out of nowhere and just all of a sudden happened. This is something that has been 20 years in the making, and we're seeing it play out right now. And he recognizes and knows that, no, Europe does not want to go to war with Russia, and also Joe Biden certainly did not want to go to war, because all of them know he has more nuclear capabilities than any other country in the world, and all of them believe that he is ready to use them. The problem with the United States in terms of what we have done is we basically tied Ukraine's hand behind their back and did not give them the weaponry to be able to go on the offensive. We never provided them with Tomahawks. We never provided them with the S-400 missile system. We only gave them F-16s just as Biden was actually leaving office. And one other thing that Biden did just as he was leaving office was he then only allowed Ukraine to use the weapons that were provided by the United States to actually go on the offensive, but they could not hit Moscow. So they were already in a very weakened and vulnerable state. And now you have Donald Trump, who many see as a Putin troll and is not going to do what is necessary. And Putin recognizes and sees all of this. And as your guest is saying, he is not going to stop because he doesn't have to, because no one is going to make him.
His economy is being hit hard, though, Harley, isn't it, at the moment, in terms of the Russian economy and the oil and the gas situation? There is only so long that they can continue to be denigrated, or just in terms of the finances, that it's not good. Go on, Eric, did you have something to say?
Oh, I'll let him.
Go on, Harley. How's the situation at the moment in Russia economically?
Well, yeah, of course, the Russian economy is stretched thin, but they could go for a very long time. They're on a war footing. Everybody said they wouldn't make it this far. They'll make it the same way Germany's economy managed towards the end of the war. It's stressful, but there are so many loopholes in the sanctions we have against Russia. If we want to stop Russia, here's what you have to do, and your previous speaker was spot on. One, give to Ukrainians Tomahawks. So they could strike deep into Russia. Second, stop Russia where it matters, which is they are funding their war by the selling of oil. If you could stop that, if you could sanction countries that are buying their oil, you dry up the funds. You don't have to go to war. Somebody said about marching on Moscow. Nobody's marching on Moscow. When we see NATO expanded, let's talk about that for a quick second. Sweden and Finland, on their own, NATO didn't come to them. They said, we want to join NATO because we see a threat from Russia. Holland is not threatening anybody. Estonia is not threatening anybody. Poland isn't. There's only one country in Europe that's threatening nations and attacking nations, Russia. So, NATO is a defensive organization. And I have an answer to your question. The reason why I believe it's taking place now is because Biden ran out of Afghanistan, and countries watch these things. And they saw America is on the retreat. America is not. Pax Americana as an era is over. And they see that they can take advantage of it. And that's why he went into Ukraine now. He saw America as particularly weak. During the Trump administration and previous to that, I suspect Putin didn't feel they were either ready for war or he wasn't sure. And I think that's, to me, the most plausible reason as to why he did it now.
And perhaps getting to the end of his presidency, that might be an issue, Matthew. There are rumours about his health, of course, all along, and wanting to leave Russia in a stronger position than he took it over, perhaps.
Well, Mr. Lipmann said that nobody's marching to Moscow, but the question is then where does it end? If European nations invest in troops on the ground in Ukraine, if you can't stop a madman until you stop a madman, where is the stopping point? Is it at the border between Ukraine and Russia, or is it into the Russian people's territory in what is now known as Russia?
Three things are actually still at play. One, you have Russia is able to sell its oil freely to both China and India. And India has made clear that even with the trade war with the United States, they are not going to stop buying that cheap Russian energy. And also, we know China, as the second largest economy in the world, they're prepared to continue to not only prop up Russia, but also to continue to purchase Russian oil as well. In addition to that, where Europe needs to actually get serious about this is there is nearly $170 billion in frozen assets that Europe holds that belongs to Russia. They need to take those resources and provide them to Ukraine in order for Ukraine to buy American military weapons to be able to fight on an even keel against Russia. I think that is when Vladimir Putin will know that this is serious. But until then, Europe has to actually show that they've got some skin in the game, and they need to be serious about this. And right now, we're just not seeing that.
Okay. Last word to you then, Harley.
Yeah, I just think that, again, when you look at history, it really tells you everything, because people don't change. You get new information, technology changes, but dictators that succeed in conquering their weaker neighbor never stops. I can't think of any in history that did. He will be emboldened to do what he said he'll do. He wants this land back for the Russian Empire. And it's like anything in life, people don't go through a red light because there are consequences. They don't want to hit another car. They don't want to get a ticket. Same thing with dictators. I'm not suggesting you have to go into Moscow. That would be a bad idea. I think if you show Putin that it's going to be a higher price to continue this war as opposed to ending it, that's where you'll get him to the peace table the best way, without more violence and more killing. But you have to do that. It's like anything in life. He has to pay a very big price, and the United States has to have the will to do that, which is very questionable. And above all, what I would say to Europe is, forget about America. America is in an isolationist mode. They see this as Europe's problem. They see Europe as not stepping up with their own defense. They don't want America to defend Europe anymore. America has been in Afghanistan, Vietnam, and Iraq, and Americans view them all as failures. America has no appetite and will not help Europe. And Europe has over 500 million people. Russia has 130 million people. And there's 32 members of NATO. Europe has to get its act together and defend its way of life, or they're going to lose this war, and they're going to be corrupted and taken over by Russia. And the way of life that everybody knows now will decline dramatically.